All right, everybody. Here we are again. This is number 86. 86 of these things. And by the way, I think this might be the last time I use this software until I figure out how to make it work. Because it looks like I went back to last week's and I watched it, and it's like I would get a better video if I was doing still shots. I don't know why it's doing that. I didn't get any complaints last week, but yeah, it was. I would have complained. So the sound was okay, but it was like frame, frame, frame. Hello, Anthony. Nice to see you. Thanks. Anthony says, thanks for the plug on the Trumpet Gods. Yeah. You know, that's an important topic, really. And you know, I've had so many students that, and it's not just. So you pointed out in your comment, you pointed out how that it's, you know, about the resting thing, and that's part of it, right? That's part of it. But you know, there's a lot of, hello James, there's a lot of stuff that goes along with that trumpet god stuff that messes up. I mean, you get anxiety from it, you get, I don't know how to explain it. You know, after so many years of working with students, how do you, I had a student one time when I very first started teaching this stuff, right? I told her, and you know, I don't remember the gender. What I do with these old stories is I change the gender every time so that nobody ever thinks I'm talking about them. Right? I would hate sometimes for those students to later come back and say, oh, you were talking about me in your video. So I change the gender all the time. So sometimes it's a girl, sometimes a guy. The story is true. I'm not, it's not like I'm lying or something. Hello, Javier. But anyway, so the one girl, I told her, I said, the best way to perform, and I believe this entirely, right? The best way to perform is to not care about the quality of your performance when you get there, right? And what I mean by that, and this is part of that whole trumpet god thing, right? What I mean by that is when we're at home and we practice properly, you have the luxury to not care. If you cared enough when you were at home practicing, then you have the luxury to not care how well it goes when you're actually there on the performance. And you know, I had a friend of a friend. We were having dinner together, and this friend of a friend said, certainly you don't mean that they don't care, that they shouldn't care. And I said, actually, yes, I do mean that. And, you know, in the music world, it's like, how dare you? How dare you right? But that's the whole music god thing again, right? How dare you tell the students that they shouldn't care about their performance in the quality of their performance, right? But they're missing the whole point. You care about that before you get there. It's too late when you got there, right? Anyway, so this girl, she's crying, and she says, Mr. Lewis, I tried to not care whether I won the concert or not, won the contest or not, but I still won. I'm ruining the story, sorry. She says, I still lost even though I didn't care. And she's crying about that. I'm like, I think you missed something here. If you didn't care, you wouldn't be crying right now. You know? And that's the thing, right? It's so hard to us as trumpet players because we really want this. We really want to play great. We want to be really, really good at what we do, right? And that's a good thing to want that. But there's a point at which the wanting it is what's getting in the way of getting it. Does that make sense? There's a point when you want it so bad that it's going to make you not get it. And so yes, I have that with a lot of students. I have issues like that with, and it's hidden sometimes, right? That's why I'm into this thing because I've said this before. I'm not into perfection anymore. I could care less about perfection. I could care less about perfection. We want quality, yes. Let's strive for quality. Perfection is not a good thing. But more than anything else, what we want are these layers of familiarity. For everything that we do, we want these layers of familiarity. Layers of familiarity. That's the most important thing. I'm going to try to... Okay, I can't do that. All right, so let me read what some of you guys have. Javier says, hello, Eddie and friends. Good to see you all. I hope everyone is okay. I'm okay. I hope all you guys are all okay. James says, I sent you an email with links to this morning's chops practice. Got it out too late to include in today's discussion though. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I'm going to take a look at that. Might not be today because I just realized I have a chart to write for tomorrow. So, yeah. All right. So Javier says, got this classmate that doesn't care about anything in exams, even if he hasn't studied enough. I don't know how he does it. He is a weird character though. Yeah, so that's how I figured this stuff out. You know, some of the best musicians I've ever worked with are those musicians that had the entirely wrong attitude. It's like the worse their attitude was, the less problem they had with their playing. And I don't think we should ever be like that. You know, that's like, I put that in the same category as doing drugs to play better. That's or following your teeth or whatever. I'm not into that. But you got to find out what it is in our desire, or specifically your own desire. And this I'm talking to each one of you individually, collectively, but individually. You have to look at your own desire and see how is that getting in the way of you making your progress. There's one student that I used to teach that sometimes he comes here on the Q and A, and so I try not to talk about people who might be listening. I just realized how bad that sounds, huh? Um, but this one student had more ambition than any trumpet student I've ever taught, ever. Probably more talent too. And you know, that's like uh, the best of both worlds, right? So people we complain a lot of times that the people who have talent don't have ambition, and that the people who have ambition don't have talent. Um, and that's a nice little formula that people try to teach, saying, yeah, some people have talent, but some people have no talent, but they can make up for it with their hard work and ambition. But this student was so ambitious that it was making him a bad player. A very talented, good trumpet player, good person, but so extremely ambitious that his ambition itself was causing him to play badly. And you would think, I don't know, you would think that, oh, I just found it here. Oh, that's why. So that's not what I'm going to do. Never mind. Anyway, you would think that they're, hello, Sean. I see Sean's on here. You would think that the ambition would be a good thing, right? But that's the trumpet god stuff. If your ambition is misplaced, if your ambition is for the wrong thing, it can really mess you up. And I think sometimes what happens, and I'm not talking about anybody specifically this time, but I think something that happens sometimes is that their ambition is not for the music itself, which is bad enough, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. What their ambition is for people to like them. And I'm serious, this happens. There's people that their ambition is they want to be such great players that everybody's going to like them. And I'm sorry, do you know what? That's some pretty messed up stuff. Anyway. But yes, there are people who just don't care, they got bad attitudes, and you're right, it's not just music. They they excel because their own head is not getting in the way. JMO says diminishing returns. Let's see, what are we talking about with diminishing returns? Anyway, I'm not sure the context there. All right. Javier says he seems he doesn't care about anything in life. I don't know how he does it. He's not normal. Yeah. JMO says, sounds like that classmate knows there's more to life than exams. Sean says, so you practice and care while preparing, then you don't have to care during the performance and just have fun. That is exactly right, Sean. Glad to see you on here, Sean. And thank you for sending the email. I'll get back to you on that as soon as I can. I've been teaching all morning. But yes, I'll respond to your email probably today sometimes. Okay. Anthony says, I knew this trumpet player in high school. He played great, and only thing is he had an attitude, wasn't very nice at times. But then again, maybe I was a sensitive wimp. Oh. So, that's what we're talking about right now, I guess, is that whole attitude thing. I remember when I was in high school, I think this is the first time I saw this. Um, and once again, I mean, some of these guys might actually watch this thing, so I've got to be careful about how I'm saying this. But yes, there was a guy that had what we were told was a bad attitude, but he was the best player in the school, and it wasn't so much that he thought he was so good. I think that's a different kind of attitude. There's a different kind of attitude that says, "Oh, I'm better than everybody else." That's not the attitude I'm talking about. The attitude I'm talking about is I just don't care. I have a bunch of stories about how this stuff um in my life, how I've discovered this not caring thing. And I might have told you guys this story before, I don't know. I had a gig. It was like a 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, maybe 3 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon. I had a gig Sunday night. I'm sorry, Saturday night was a salsa gig, and didn't get home till maybe 3 o'clock in the morning. I got about an hour or two of sleep, and then my parents were in town. My brother came. We were gonna go fishing. We got in the boat, went out to the bay, and did our fishing. I didn't eat, so I had no sleep. I had no food. Our plan was to get back soon enough to eat lunch. Um, but we were late getting back, and I didn't have time to eat lunch. I was also dehydrated because I didn't take enough stuff to drink, and sunburnt along with that, which makes you more dehydrated. And when I got to that 3 o'clock, 2 o'clock, whatever time the gig was, the afternoon gig, um, I thought for sure I was going to have a lousy gig because my mind was practically shut off. I couldn't think about anything. Um, I was exhausted. Like you can't believe. It turned out to be the best gig to that day of me playing with that band. I was the jazz chair that night, and I played great solos. I'm not saying I try not to say that about myself ever, right? It's not for me to decide how good I am or how good I'm not, according to what other people say. I'm not going to ever say I'm a great player, but everyone was complimenting me that night and telling me how good my solos were and stuff like that. How is this possible? It tells you that the conscious mind is not what takes care of that stuff for you. All of that great trumpet playing comes from your subconscious mind, and a lot of times what you do to get your subconscious mind out of the way is going to make you a better player. That's why, now I don't recommend this, and I'm going on record as saying this is a terrible, terrible idea, but this is why people do drugs as musicians, because in the beginning it helps you play better. That's a terrible, terrible reason to do drugs. And do not ever say that I was the reason that you did drugs. I will deny it first, and then I will like never speak to you again. Not that that would make any difference, but yes. Um, but stuff like that. And I think what happens if you have a bad attitude and you just don't care about how well it goes, how good the concert is, or anything like that, you just don't care, it gets your mind out of the way. It gets you out of the way of you. Gets you out of the way of the music. I hope that makes sense. JMO says, diminishing returns pertaining to the students, putting more energy in than is required and getting the opposite effect than was. Okay, so yes, that's part of it, JMO. That is definitely part of it. But the stuff I'm talking about is not nearly as mathematical as that. Okay? I'm talking about stuff that is almost borderline mental illness type stuff. Really. I'm not, so what you're talking about is more like the fatigue type stuff, right? And yes, there is a component of that. There is part, that is part of what I'm talking about. But the when you have overly ambitious students, yes, fatigue, mental fatigue becomes one of the problems, but so much more is the now remember, great trumpet playing comes from your subconscious mind, and because it comes from our subconscious mind, it's fragile, right? Because it comes from our subconscious mind, great trumpet playing is fragile. Okay? And what you think can destroy your playing. The way you think can destroy your performance. It really can. James says, my low C sharp is very sharp, and I have a fixed ring on the third valve tuning slide. I cannot get the ring finger to extend far enough to get in tune. Should I get ring mollified or work on lip bending to tune? Okay, so do you not have a saddle on the first valve slide? Because that's really, I would never try to do that just with the third valve. I would do both on the C sharp. Now it also depends on what key you're in and what the context is. Sometimes it doesn't have to be that far out. I hope that makes sense. So now what I have seen is where people will put a shoelace here. They'll put a shoelace and then the shoelace goes around their finger, and so they push out from here, and then the shoelace, they can pull it back in. I have seen that. But really, if you can, we want to do both sides. Oh, what else do we have here? So, Javier says, I got a question. What causes double buzz? I have it every now and again, every now and then, and I've been experimenting this feeling that my mouthpiece feels smaller and smaller, but my lips never swell. So, according to Wikipedia, I'm the authority on double buzz. And what disturbs me about that is I wrote that article almost 20 years ago, and they're using it as a reference for Wikipedia. And what I say in the article is that it's fatigue. This is long-term fatigue that doesn't go away with just resting one time. That's what I say in the article. Today I'm not as convinced that I know what I'm talking about. And I think that's a sign of age, right? As we get older, we know less. A more wise person knows when he's wrong, right? Or when he could be wrong. I'm not absolutely convinced, but that doesn't mean I wouldn't start there. Are you following the 3 levels of rest, and are you doing it all the time? Okay? That's the first thing I always have to ask about when I hear someone talk about double buzz. I want to know, are you resting the three levels? Con Vintage 1 says, something I've learned is to just enjoy the process. Not as easy as thought. Still not, but you've made it much easier. That's good. Yes, it is enjoying the process. Um, yeah, so there's so many head games. I could keep going on about that, but there's so many things that we do here. And you're right, if we turn that into pleasure, no, I guess not, pleasure is not the right word. If we enjoy it while we're doing it, all of it, right? So yeah, I agree with that. Gary Sheehan says, I had one beer before a jazz masterclass, and it was the most positive response I got on an improvised solo. And my classmates, so I get what you're saying. Okay, yeah, exactly. I think that's dangerous, though. I really do. Um, and I know you're just saying it was one beer, and I am in no position to condemn anybody at all, so don't take it that way. Um, but yes, I think that's a dangerous door to open because of the way the human mind works. You know, alcohol is hard enough to, I mean, how am I saying this? Alcohol is easy enough to get addicted to without adding that to the mix, right? So then it's very easy to get to a point. And how do I know this, by the way? There's things in my life that I thought, like for example, let me use an example. This is not illegal, so I don't mind telling you about this. Um, there was a time in my life where I thought I couldn't teach, I couldn't improvise, I couldn't um, do anything with my mind if I wasn't taking ginkgo. Right? I thought I would panic. Where's my ginkgo? Where's my ginkgo? Because I'd have to go to a sight reading gig, and I'm like, I've got to have my ginkgo. And you know, the coffee is the same way, by the way. Coffee is the same way. You can get to a point where had a good experience, and you attribute that good experience to what you ingested before the good experience, and it's hard to turn that off. It really is hard to turn that off. I can imagine how much more. So I'm not a drinker. I'm not saying I don't drink. I just don't drink. I remember I used to hang out at this bar a long time ago, and um, I told the bartender, I told her, I said, you know what? I think this is, I think I'm just gonna have to quit drinking. And she laughed at me. She said, Eddie, you never started. She says, as much as you're drinking, nobody would call that drinking. So that's my experience drinking. So I quit not drinking about 15 years ago. Now I really, really don't drink. So, um, so yeah. But yeah, the drinking thing is a dangerous door to open because you can, and the thing is, I actually know people I work with sometimes that actually believe they can't do their best job on stage if they don't have a few drinks before they play. I know people who feel that they just can't deliver their best if they don't have a drink. Where does that leave you? What kind of margin in your life does that leave you? So it is a dangerous door to open. That said, though, we're talking about stuff that turns your conscious mind off, and the drinking does that. The drinking does that. All right, so Javier says, I don't know if I'm right on this, but I know that my chops are getting stronger from the salsa hammering days. Could this be the reason the mouthpiece feels smaller? Yes, it could be. Javier says, thank you, Eddie, for sharing your experiences, and that is not just passing information. Experiences is what make us humans and empathize. Right, exactly. So, that's all of the orchestra teachers, right? The orchestra trumpet teachers, they're like collections of these stories like that. That's how you know a great trumpet or orchestral trumpet teacher is all the stories that they tell. And it's always been like that. If you guys remember, I almost lost my voice last week, and I realized, so I've been not teaching on Fridays for a long, long time because I've been wanting to leave it open for other stuff. But I realized recently that I need to actually start teaching did I say Fridays? Fridays. And I started teaching on Fridays, and I think what happened was I had those lessons before the Q and A, and I was already doing, talking so much. And then I got dehydrated, and I think, whoo, it came close. Anyway, you're welcome, Javier. That's what we're here for. Any other questions? I have a question for you guys. Is the video going like 1 frame per second or what? What I looked at the other day, it was like a frame every 3 seconds. Is that what's happening now? If that is happening now, then I'm not going to use this software anymore. I'll go back to the webcam starting next week. I thought if I set it to a lag of 30 seconds that it would fix that. Maybe it did fix it. Maybe not. But let me know if the video is really, really, really slow. Yeah, Gary says it's a little glitchy. Yeah, I'm gonna go back to the webcam. I mean, the perks of having the the other stuff I can do with this, it's just not enough. Yeah, Javier says it's a little slow-mo. James says, are you familiar with the jazz musicians Bria Skomberg and Cindy Bradley? If so, how would you describe this style? Melodic, smooth, any recommendations of other similar jazz artists? Bria Skomberg, um, I get them mixed up sometimes. I think her and I were on the same festival together one time, but I think she was on another night, and from me, I was playing with a big band, and I think she had her own show. If it's the same woman I'm thinking of, um, yeah, I'm not so. Cindy Bradley, I don't know. And if I'd hate to get the wrong, isn't she? Let me look it up real quick. I know that all of these. Oh, so I don't know this. I don't know her at all. No, I don't. I'm not familiar with either one of these. I don't think. Let me double check on YouTube because Isn't I thought the woman I was thinking about also sings. Oh, she does sing. Maybe that's who I'm thinking about. You know what I think it is? I think I get her mixed up with another trumpet player that sings. I think that's the problem. And that's why I'm afraid to say anything, because I would hate to get them mixed up and get that wrong. Because even though they remind me of each other, the style that they play in is not at all the same. If, but here's the thing, if I remember right, she does more of a classic type thing that would almost not be called jazz. So, in certain circles, you almost wouldn't call that jazz. If it's the same person I'm thinking of, you almost wouldn't call that jazz. It's almost like, even though it's got jazz qualities, and at first I thought all this stuff was, um, what you call it, I thought if you played jazz tunes, it was jazz, right? And who am I to say what's jazz and what's not jazz? I'm not trying to get into that conversation. I'm just talking about what people I've talked to have said. Um, so I can be on this with the same band playing the same music, but in this context it's jazz, and in this other context it's not jazz. And it's not the improvisation. I don't know how to explain it, and I don't have names for it. But I think she's more, I guess one way you could say it is it's more classic jazz style, right? I don't know. But I wouldn't want to say too much about what I would call it. Probably not smooth. Smooth jazz we usually associate with electronic instruments. Electric guitar, electric bass, um, stuff like that. Javier says it kind of looks a little slow-mo. Thanks for the feedback. Con Vintage says, thankfully the Intel still comes through crystal clear. So I'll switch back to the webcam next week. I mean, it's still doing webcam. I'm just saying. So when I say webcam, there's two ways to do streaming, and one of them is the webcam way, and one of them is this software way. And I'm gonna not do the software next week. Javier says, would you recommend studying trumpet players? I kind of feel when you study trumpet players' styles, you may end up playing like someone else. Okay, so because of Freddie Hubbard saying that he doesn't study trumpet players, he only listens to sax and piano players, I think he said. Piano and sax players. For a long time, that's how I felt. I didn't want to buy so many trumpet albums. I wanted to buy, uh, you know, the other musicians that I liked. But here's the thing. Now that I teach motivic improv instead of the other stuff that people teach, I don't think it matters. I don't think you have the risk of sounding like somebody else. I don't think that's, with the way I teach, it's not going to be like that. So, but you have to, in order for that to be true, you have to really break everything down to the motifs. And I really haven't done a lot to help you guys know what I mean by that. It's just, I think, I teach this stuff, but I don't actually have it all like I don't even know some of the words I'm supposed to be using to describe some of this stuff. That's why I don't share so much of it, because I don't really know. I haven't worked all the details out yet. I had a student today in the morning, and he says, do you have all this in the book? I said, no, there's no book for all this. And he goes, really, man, I would buy that from you right away. If you had this in a book, I would buy it. I'm like, you know, I told him it's just not done yet, right? I'm still not done. I've been working on this since 1980. It's still not done percolating yet. But yes, the short answer to your question, I would I would still recommend um, listening to trumpet players now. I think it's a little bit. You know what I don't like? I don't like knee jerk, right? I don't know if other cultures have that same expression. We talk about knee jerk reactions, and where in response to one thing you end up doing the opposite thing, right? And you know, I think it's too easy to I think it's too easy to like automatically just flip to the other side. Like, a good example is I don't like the way my parents raised me, so I'm going to raise them the opposite way. Well, you know what? The opposite way is probably just as bad, if not worse, right? So, I mean, what stops us from actually thinking deeper than that? We should think deeper than that. So if you don't want to play like somebody else, then don't play like somebody else. You can still get stuff from them. Con Vintage says, grateful to you, sir. Thank you. Looking forward to shedding with you some one day soon. Okay, sounds good to me. SK, hello SK. I have a question about corners, embouchure, or on buzzing. Should they be as tight as during practice with trumpet? Um, you know, I'm not so concerned about corners at all as a lot of people are. Okay. Um, if you have a smooth sound, and I don't want to use the word good sound in the context of lip buzz, because you're not going to get a good sound in the lip buzz, right? But if it's a smooth sound, then your corners are what they need to be. If you make your corners too tight, um, you're going to get a slightly different sound. I hope that makes sense. So I'm not really that concerned about corners. I think corners are just, and you know what I learned also about corners? Um, I learned this I guess it was about 20 years ago. I had an epiphany, because I remember when I first started playing trumpet, my corners used to ache. And about 20 years ago, I started lifting weights again. When it comes to lifting weights, I'm on, I'm off, I'm on, I'm off. Um, and this was a time when my brother had just given me his set. So I started lifting weights again. I had this epiphany. It had nothing to do with the weights, but it was during the weightlifting that I had this epiphany. And I realized that when I was younger, my lips were weaker. So what I felt as firmness in the lips, in the corners of the lips, is not what I would perceive as firmness in the corners today, right? Because that's relative. If those corners get stronger, you're not going to feel it anymore. So it's not something that, how the corners feel is not something that's etched in stone. How the corners feel is not something that you can rely on. I hope that makes sense. That's not something. So I know guys that have been playing for 40 years and they're trying to get their corners back. They tell me they're trying to get their firm corners back. What if, I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm not saying they're wrong at all. But let's consider the possibility that the reason your corners aren't firm anymore is because you're so strong now that you can't feel them when they're being used. So no, I'm not a real big fan of thinking about corners. I am more concerned about what does it sound like. So, I know that doesn't really answer your question, but I would rather just not think about corners. You know, getting a lip buzz at all is so miraculous in the first place. We don't want to mess with that. I hope that makes sense. We don't want to mess with that. If you can get a lip buzz, congratulations, because a lot of people can't. About 50% of my students can't do a proper lip buzz. And when I say that, I don't mean 50% of my students now. I mean 50% of my students over my whole history of teaching. Because right now they can all hello, Gabriel. Javier says, it's difficult, the motif thing, because apart from repeating patterns, no one knows where creativity comes from or identity. Is like the question about the soul. Actually, for me, Javier, the motif stuff is nothing like that. And that's why I have to apologize for not doing a better job of explaining it. Okay? Let me try to explain some of it now. Okay, let me see what James says. I just feel that many jazz trumpet players try to impress by fitting as many notes as possible before the next chord change. Doesn't sound very melodic or musical to me, although I admit it is impressive. You know, part of that is education because that's how they're taught. It depends on who you're listening to. I don't think the greats play like that. Okay? I don't think the greats play like that. And if you're playing motivically, if you're listening to someone who plays motivically, I don't think you would have that impression. SK Thing says, thank you, you're welcome. Gabriel says, hey Anthony, it's okay. Okay, good. Anthony says, should you do lip and mouthpiece buzz every day? Yes, in my system you do lip buzz first. Well, actually you start with some sort of exhale exercise, breathing. I don't like calling it breathing. I just don't know why I just called it breathing. Air exercise, then lip buzz, and then mouthpiece buzz. And I don't believe in doing anything every day, but when I say every day, I mean every day that you practice. Okay? Now, let's talk about the motif stuff. So, if I want to play a turnaround, right? Let's say I'm playing that last 4 bars in Cherokee, or not Cherokee, well, I guess Cherokee too. That last 4 bars of rhythm changes, right? Right? Da ba da ba ba. That's one motif. Okay? That's the second motif. Ba, ba, da, ba, da. That's the third motif. So far, I've got 3 motifs, and it just happens that those 3 motifs outline a turnaround. I'm not thinking, oh, this is the 6th chord, this is the, you know, I'm not thinking like that. I'm thinking these motifs go together. Adding more motifs. So in my head, because of the way I've been practicing these years, right? In my head, I have basically what amounts to, most of them are 2-beat motifs. That's a 2-beat motif. Another 2-beat motif. 2-beat motif. Now, I remember when I first started asking people about that. When I first, because I remember hearing Charlie Parker go, right, something like that. And I asked somebody that I knew in El Paso, I said, how do they know when to, because it's clearly chromatic scale. How do they know when to stop the chromatic scale and do something else? And you know what the answer was? Eddie, you think too much. Well, that didn't help me, right? And what really this is 2 motifs, two motifs, right? That's not the chromatic scale. That's that first is the motif that descends from the B to the G chromatically. It's not a chromatic scale. Right? That's 3 different motifs. I keep moving my fingers in the wrong spot. Okay? That's 3 motifs. So I could do a different motif in the place of any of those motifs, right? Okay? You see what I'm doing? And so now today when I improvise, and this is, by the way, just as true for my improv in jazz as it is in classical, I'm always now improvising motivically. It's just that jazz is a little harder because there are more motifs to learn. I hope that makes sense. So if I sit and play something, that's just a sequence of 2-beat motifs, one after another, after another, after another. Okay? So I hope that helps with the motivic stuff a little bit better. So it's not so much of an arbitrary feel thing or anything like that. There really is, like if you look at the Charlie Parker Omnibook, the Charlie Parker Omnibook is almost 100% motivic material. Same thing, by the way, with all of Clifford Brown's solos. Clifford Brown was also one of those 100%, not really 100%, more like 95, 98% motivic content. James says, if you have time, can you briefly describe what you mean by horizontal improv versus vertical? Sounds like something that I would be interested in. Okay, let's check this out. Now, I teach something that is a modified version of And this is the kind of thing I have to give credit for, because this is not something I invented. I teach a modified version of a book that I read by George Russell, and he has what he calls the 4 ways to play. Okay? And this is how I teach it. I don't remember even how he teaches it anymore. I think he passed away not long ago. He says there's 4 ways to play. So you have ingoing, vertical, ingoing, horizontal. You've got outgoing, vertical, and you have outgoing, horizontal. Okay? The hardest one of these to do is ingoing vertical. And unfortunately, this is the one that they teach in school. They start you off with the hardest thing. Talk about sink or swim. That's the hardest one to do. Out of all of these 4, that's the hardest one. This one is the easiest one. Ingoing horizontal. Now, horizontal playing is when you play, some people would say that that's more melodic improvisation. I don't necessarily agree with that, because melodic can be harmonic too, right? Just look at the Getro book, right? The Getro Etude book. And tell me that's not harmonic. It's very, very melodic stuff, but it's also deep, 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 rich in harmony. Okay, so I wouldn't say that it was melodic playing. The way I interpret this, in going horizontal is when you play in the key. So like, for example, Cherokee, that's not, I keep saying Cherokee. What's the name of that tune? I've Got Rhythm. I'm sorry. I've Got Rhythm. We generally do that in B-flat concert, our C. If you improvise in the key of C over the whole tune, you are improvising horizontally. And no, there's nothing wrong with doing it that way. It is the easiest way, though. Okay, we're going to say this is the easiest way. So yes, it's not as advanced. So it's not going to sound nearly as good. I hope that makes sense. But this is the easiest way to stand up there and sound at least kind of good. Maybe a little boring. But what you're going to do is going to fit. Because technically, rhythm changes doesn't really change keys. Okay? Now, outgoing is when you play the wrong notes on purpose. That's my way of saying it. When you play dissonance, outgoing vertical, outgoing horizontal, they're not so hard to do. Outgoing horizontal, and this is my interpretation of it. I know this is not how George Russell taught it, but outgoing horizontal to me is when you do dissonance based on a I don't want to call it scale. I call it the key. Dissonance based on the key. So, for example, polytonality would fall in this category. So let's say the tune is in B-flat concert and you decide to play licks or motifs that are clearly in E-flat concert or D-flat concert or G concert. You're creating outgoing melodies, outgoing content based on a key center that is different from the key that you're in. That's outgoing horizontal. Outgoing vertical, the best example of this that I do, and once again, this is my interpretation, okay? Outgoing vertical is when you play harmonies that are not in the chord, in the tune. And I do this kind of thing all the time. People think I'm nuts for doing it. So let's say I'm playing, let me go back to this. Let's say I'm playing, okay, since the blues is here, let's do the blues, right? So I actually believe that when you play more quarterly, Q-U-A-R-T-A-L-Y, maybe I spelled that wrong, but it's not C-H-O-R, Q-U-A-R, quarterly. When you play more quarterly, I believe that falls in the outgoing vertical, not horizontal. And you can do other stuff too, right? If you're playing patterns like, right? If you're playing stuff like that, then you're doing also outgoing vertical, as far as I'm concerned. But there are other things you can do that make it more outgoing vertical, like you can do like what they call it sidestepping and stuff like that. Now anyway, the guy that teaches this, George Russell, he actually says that all great trumpet, not just trumpet players, all great jazz players do all four of those ways of playing. But anyway, that's what horizontal is when you're playing in the key. Now the hard thing about jazz tunes is that almost all of them, all the good jazz tunes change key. And you just have to know where to change the key. Gabriel says, Eddie, intervals are an issue for me. I tried the Bach-cello's preludes for trumpet. Do you think it can be good exercises? Yes, I do. I love those Bach-cello suites. You know, the interval thing is just a matter of familiarity. It's just a familiarity issue. Really. You just got to keep doing it and get used to it. Javier says, I asked the same question myself, when to stop the chromatic. Yeah, that way of thinking simplifies it enormously. That's a cool way of approaching it. Yeah, I've been working on that system for about 30 years now, creeping up on 40 years. Mary says your clocks have changed already. Yeah, we changed on Sunday. So sorry to get here too early. Alright, so I see we're over time, and it looks like the computer's kind of doing some weird stuff. Do you guys have any more questions before I go?